Thank you so much for joining us for CBN News Watch. I'm Efrem Graham. Ahead today, Republican senators asking why the Justice Department is treating pro-life and pro-choice groups differently. The Attorney General on the hot seat, senators asking him about a double standard as attacks on crisis pregnancy centers go unprosecuted, while the FBI arrested a Catholic pro-life advocate in an armed raid at his home in front of his family last fall. Students from multiple states telling how the revival that began at Asbury University has come to their schools in a worship event at Rupp Arena in Kentucky. Protest in Israel over Prime Minister Netanyahu's plan to reform the country's judicial system. We'll bring you the story from Jerusalem. Warnings about new international regulations for future pandemics and the concerns they would give the World Health Organization authority over key parts of our lives. And a Marine veteran goes back into Afghanistan to rescue his interpreter. We'll hear how prayer played a key role in getting him to safety, and how the mission grew into an effort to rescue more than 17,000 people. Those stories and more today on CBN News Watch.
This is CBN News Watch.
We begin in Washington with Attorney General Merrick Garland grilled by Republican senators over what they see as a blatant double standard between how pro-life and pro-choice groups are being treated for their beliefs. Matt Galka brings us the story.
A lot has happened in the last year since Merrick Garland last faced the Senate Judiciary Committee. But a lot of senators wanted to know why there were seemingly so many more pro-life Americans being charged by the Justice Department. A large portion of the hearing had to do with attacks on pro-life centers in the wake of the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision last year. Utah Senator Mike Lee asked Garland about the disparity in justice. 34 people were charged for blocking access to abortion clinics last year, while only 2 people have been charged in the hundreds of attacks on crisis pregnancy centers and churches across the country.
So how do you explain this disparity by reference to anything other than politicization of what's happening there?
Those who are attacking the pregnancy resources centers, which is a horrid thing to do, are doing this at night in the dark. We have put full resources on this.
Multiple senators turned up the heat when they asked Garland about Mark Houck. The Catholic pro-life advocate recently beat a federal case after being arrested in an armed FBI raid at his home in Pennsylvania in front of his wife and kids last fall.
Why do you send 24 agents in body armor to arrest a sidewalk counselor who happens to be pro-life, but you don't devote resources to prosecute people who are violently firebombing crisis pregnancies?
It is a priority of the department to prosecute and investigate and find the people who are doing those firebombings.
Are you telling me that in your opinion as Attorney General, it was objectively necessary to use 20 or 30 SWAT-style agents with long guns and ballistic shields for these people?
What I'm saying is that decisions about how to go about this were made on the ground by FBI agents.
So you're saying you don't know?
I'm saying what I just said.
Which is that you're abdicating responsibility?
I'm not abdicating responsibility.
Then give me the answer.
Houck tells CBN that he wants to hold the agencies accountable for what happened to him.
We need people to know that we were innocent of everything that happened, and that now we want to pursue justice.
Another tense exchange happened when Garland answered questions about parental rights.
The National School Board Association said these parents ought to be investigated under the Patriot Act as potential domestic terrorists.
And you'll notice, Senator, that I said nothing like that.
I understand, but that's what the letter said.
There was a reference to that in the letter, right. Something I disagree with.
And your employees helped them write the letter, didn't they?
I don't know anything to suggest that that's true.
I think it is true.
Garland also faced some tough questions about an FBI memo that went out this year, allegedly targeting traditionalist Catholics. Garland called that memo appalling and said the FBI was not targeting people based on religion. Matt Galka, CBN News.
Matt, thank you. Now we want to turn to an update on the revival movement, which began at Asbury University and has been spreading across the country. Amazing testimonies have surfaced from the quickly organized worship service that was held Sunday at Rupp Arena in Lexington, Kentucky. As CBN News has reported, evangelist Nick Hall, along with a group of Bible-believing pastors and ministry leaders, booked the arena after the revival events were moved off the campus of Asbury University. Students shared Bible verses and worship worship the Lord together. Hall said thousands of people came and went during the 9-hour service and that 50,000 people watched the event online. Students from Asbury, Lee University, Oral Roberts University, Minneapolis, South Carolina, and Wisconsin testified of the revivals breaking out on their campuses and inside their organizations. You can find out more about this event and keep up with the latest developments on the spread of revival at cbnnews.com. Turning back to Capitol Hill, House Republicans are moving ahead with their plans on education by introducing a bill called the Parents' Bill of Rights. Wendy Griffith has that story.
One thing we know in this country is education is the great equalizer, and we want the parents to be empowered.
House Speaker Kevin McCarthy says the Parents' Bill of Rights Act sits on 5 main pillars: the right to know what's being taught in schools and the reading material, the right to be heard, the right to see school budgets, the right to protect their children's privacy, and the right to be updated on any violent activity at school.
We think these are pretty basic things that everybody and every parent should have a right to.
Several parents were on hand to remind lawmakers why this legislation is so critical. One mom from Rhode Island was sued by a teachers union for wanting to know what her kindergartner would be learning.
I'm still in litigation for almost 2 years with the teachers union. I still don't have my answers. But what I do know is that my school district and my teachers union didn't want to just hide the curriculum from me. They wanted to ruin my life just for asking for it. And I don't want that to happen to any other parent in America.
They sued you for asking what's being taught to your child. I mean, we wouldn't think we'd have to do this bill, but you are the exact reason why we have the Parents' Bill of Rights.
On CBN's Faith Nation, Tony Perkins of the Family Research Council raised the question of how the Democrats will respond.
It's going to be very interesting to see what the other side of the aisle does with this measure that simply empowers parents, creates transparency in education, making sure that the parents who pay for the schools have an understanding of what their children are being taught and have a voice in the process.
As parents, it is our primary duty to protect our children and preserve their innocence. Unfortunately, there is a toxic movement infiltrating our schools that is more interested in pushing a political agenda rather than teaching our students, our children, what the subjects we were taught in school.
Congresswoman Julia Letlow, who sponsored the bill, says the pandemic brought to light what's actually being taught in schools, including a curriculum heavy on LGBTQ rights, critical race theory, and other so-called woke indoctrination.
And so then we did the right thing, right? We went to our school boards and we voiced our displeasure. But we were turned away, and some of us were even labeled domestic terrorists. That was absolutely not right. And so that was the impetus for this bill. That was it, thanks to all of you in this room, for the parents for stepping up and saying, no, enough is enough.
We also saw things like gender ideology, which is teaching that you can believe that if you believe that you are another sex, that's what you should be affirmed in. And we know as parents that that is not something that's not scientific. It is not, it's not biological, and we need to deal with these problems in the proper way.
Critics say the bill would lead to education bans and take books off of classroom shelves. But House Republicans say parents have a right to a seat at the table when it comes to their children's education, and the Parents' Bill of Rights will ensure that. The bill is expected to pass the House but face strong opposition in the Democratic-controlled Senate. Wendy Griffith, CBN News.
Turning now to Israel, ongoing protests against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government turned violent Wednesday, prompting him to go on national television and call for calm on television. Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl brings us the story now. She's reporting from Jerusalem.
Dubbed a National Day of Disruption, protesters blocked main roads and key junctions in Tel Aviv and around the country. Israelis have been protesting for weeks against the government's plan to overhaul the legal system and limit powers of Israel's high court.
So what we saw was a very chaotic scene in Tel Aviv. We saw police on horseback, water cannons, stun grenades. This is something that you do not normally see on Israeli streets.
The unprecedented violence led Netanyahu to address the press and the nation, calling on protesters not to cross red lines.
I know there are many citizens among you, lovers of the country, who enthusiastically support the legal reform. I also know that there are many citizens, also lovers of the country, who oppose the reform with the same enthusiasm. But in democracy, there are clear rules on how to conduct a debate.
In Jerusalem, protesters gathered outside Netanyahu's official residence, and Netanyahu's wife, Sarah, was prevented for 3 hours from leaving a hair salon in Tel Aviv when about 1,000 protesters surrounded the place. Opposition leader Yair Lapid and Benny Gantz called on them to back off so hundreds of police could rescue her.
We can't accept violence. We can't accept beating police officers. We can't accept blocking roads. We can't accept threats to public personalities and their families. A thing that is happening at this moment exactly in the heart of Tel Aviv. We will not accept breaking the rules and violence, not in Huwara, not in Tel Aviv, and not anywhere.
Netanyahu believes the two sides can find a way to talk and agree with each other.
We will not raise a hand against each other because we are brothers. We have no other country.
Meanwhile, 5 Knesset members, including 2 from Netanyahu's Likud party, called for consensus talks on judicial reform, proposed earlier by Israeli President Yitzhak Herzog. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Coming up, a warning about new international regulations for future pandemics, why some say they would give the World Health Organization authority over healthcare, trade, and other key parts of our lives. We'll hear about that when we come back. The World Health Organization is moving forward to revise international regulations in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Some critics say the proposed changes would give the WHO authority and control over healthcare, trade, and other aspects of our lives. Appearing on this week's episode of The Global Lane, Reggie Littlejohn, president of Women's Rights Without Frontiers, explains what the proposed revisions would mean for the United States and the world.
I believe that it will mean the establishment of a worldwide totalitarian biotech state. So these instruments, and by the way, you correctly characterized the Zero Draft as an agreement. That's what they're calling it. They don't want to call it a treaty because they are deliberately trying to subvert the United States and the other countries' treaty processes. So if it's an agreement, all it takes is a signature. It does not take going through our Senate. So people say, oh, don't worry about it. It will never pass our Senate. Well, they are deliberately subverting our Senate process.
Signatories must recognize, quote, the central role of the WHO as a directing and coordinating authority on international health work. What do you believe that means?
Well, it means that the WHO is able to call the shots if there's any health emergency or potential health emergency anywhere in the world. And the language that says that they have to have the permission of the country is stricken, so that they can do it without the permission of the country. And it's not only about human health. They have something called One Health, which means that they can do it on behalf of human health, animal health, plant health, the environment. They can use any reason that they want to be able to come in and basically run the show in terms of addressing that health issue.
And I've read the Zero Draft proposal. It gives the WHO authority over the global supply chain, trade, commerce, through establishment of the WHO Global Pandemic Supply Chain and Logistics Network. WHO Director General Tedros would lead that effort early on in the pandemic. You remember Tedros praised President Xi Jinping for China's efforts to control the outbreak. So your thoughts on him and his potential control of the supply chain?
Well, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus is very closely aligned with the Chinese Communist Party, and the Chinese Communist Party has absolutely outsized influence at the World Health Organization, which is why they were able to get away with all the lies that they did, which were just amplified by Dr. Tedros. So this is not a good alliance at all. And in terms of the supply chains, they are also wanting to take control over the intellectual property. Like if somebody in the United States or another country develops a great vaccine, they're going to be forced to share that information, which I think is bad for the production of pharmaceuticals. I think that the intellectual property rights are very important.
Yes, I noticed that in the draft agreement. And here in the U.S., let's move forward. How is the Biden administration planning to use the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, to pre-approve whatever is approved by the WHO?
This is something that just came to my attention on Friday from an international law expert, that this National Defense Authorization Act, which was rammed through at the very end of the last Congress, contains within it something called the International Pandemic Preparedness Act. And I think most people in Congress don't even know about this. But that act contains a loophole in it, which he argues, and I agree, makes it that whatever the World Health Organization passes is automatically made law in the United States, again, subverting our Senate. So this needs to be opposed. And in fact, I think that the entire World Health Organization attempt to take over the world, really, through vaccine passports. That's another thing that they want to do. The World Health Organization, if these things are passed, will have the ability to mandate in the United States how we handle a pandemic, including forced quarantines, forced mask mandates, forced vaccine mandates. Why should we allow Dr. Tedros, who failed so miserably in handling the Wuhan virus, order us around about how we handle our own health? So I think that we should actually withdraw from the WHO, and we are calling for there's a bill that is sponsored by Representative Biggs, and there is also a debate right now about raising the debt ceiling. I think that anyone who believes in freedom in the U.S. Congress should condition raising the debt ceiling on U.S. withdrawal from the World Health Organization.
Okay, Reggie Littlejohn, president of Women's Rights Without Frontiers and co-chair of the Stop Vaccine Passports Task Force. Thank you for being with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And you can see other important stories on the Global Lane tonight on the CBN News Channel. It begins at 8:30 Eastern. You can find it on the CBN News app as well and watch it on YouTube. Still ahead, how a Marine veteran returned to Afghanistan on a rescue mission, how prayer played a key role in making it work, why they're thanking Jesus, and how thousands were delivered from captivity. We're going to bring you the full story right after this. After the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan followed President Biden's chaotic withdrawal, Afghans who helped the U.S. military face death. One Marine veteran and former mixed martial artist champion risked his life to go back and save his Afghan interpreter. But he says God didn't want the rescue mission to stop there. CBN's Mark Martin has this inspiring story.
When Marine veteran Chad Robichaux learned about the Biden administration's plan to pull the U.S. military out of Afghanistan, he thought it would be a disaster.
So a full withdrawal and a surrender of Bagram Air Force Base, I knew it would be catastrophic for national security, for global security, and stability in the region. And it's just not consistent with how we deal with post-war conversions as America.
Having served 8 deployments in Afghanistan, Robichaux tells CBN News his first thoughts centered on innocent people stuck in a country led by a brutal regime.
Additionally, my biggest concern was our allies, those who fought beside us for 20 years, being left behind. One being my friend Aziz, who did 15 years in special operations, 8 deployments with me, saved my life multiple times, and just my friend.
I was really worried about my children because my relatives, they turned their back at me. My friends, my parents, everyone, they're like, you're not coming to our house. This is your call. You did it. Now you handle it. And I cannot go to relatives. I cannot go to friends. and it was a total chaos. It was for me, it was like the end of the world.
14 years after Robichaux's final Middle East deployment, he organized a rescue mission to save Aziz, his wife, and 6 children. Once in Afghanistan, the situation on the ground led to change.
One of our team members noticed this group of 3,500 orphans and said, hey, let's not just get Aziz's family, let's get these orphans as well. And we kind of paused for a second. All of us are Christians. We all felt the burden that God put in our hearts to just help as many Americans, interpreters, their families, women, children, Christians that be persecuted. We just want to help as many people as we could.
The goal became a mission to save thousands from Taliban rule. Altogether, Robichaud and his coalition of heroes evacuated more than 17,000 people.
When the military was forced to leave after that Abbey Gate was blown up and 13 of our service members were killed, we chose to stay. Because we knew the White House was 100 Americans. We knew there were thousands of Americans, thousands of allies. We knew we still had the ability to help, so we did.
Robichaud shares his story in a new book titled Saving Aziz. He gives readers a behind-the-scenes look at what happened after the chaotic withdrawal of the U.S. military, describing the miraculous evacuation efforts during Afghanistan's historic humanitarian crisis.
The book's important to us, not to sell books, but it's important that the story gets out.
And the man whose name is in the title also sends his own personal message.
To please keep the Afghan poor people in your prayers, because I strongly believe in prayers. And even with this evacuation thing, I prayed in the name of Jesus and he answered. And, you know, it all happened as a miracle for me.
He kept us safe. He gave us clear thinking and opened doorways that were impossible for any man to open. And we were able to do this incredible thing and just be part of it. But ultimately, God orchestrated it, and all glory to him.
Mark Martin, CBN News.
Be right back with an encouraging word for your Thursday ahead. Stay with us. Welcome back. Time now for your Thursday Thankful. I hope you'll join me in this prayer of gratitude. God, thank you for your amazing grace. You are indeed amazing. I stand in awe of your glory, and to that prayer, I hope you will join me in saying amen and amen. Fix your heart in a posture of gratitude so this day may truly be a thankful Thursday. Well, that will do it for this edition of CBN News Watch. Remember, you can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News channel. You can find them there at any time, as well as online, cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can email us, newswatch@cbn.com. And, of course, you can reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We look forward to seeing you right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye, everybody. God bless.